A cold autumn drizzle fell over the quiet cafe patio, turning the streetlights into soft golden halos against the dark. A man sat alone at the corner table. His jacket was old, the collar turned up against the damp. His laptop was a model that had gone out of fashion 3 years ago. His shoes were the kind a man buys when he has stopped thinking about shoes. He looked like someone life had already handled roughly and set aside. Then a young woman pushed through the glass door, rain-soaked and apologetic before she had even spoken. She clutched a small canvas bag to her chest. She looked at the occupied tables, at the couples and the groups and the people who glanced up and then looked deliberately away. She walked to the corner table. Her voice was barely louder than the rain on the awning above. "Excuse me, can I sit with you?" "Just for a little while." The man looked up from his screen. He held her gaze for a moment, long enough for her to wonder if she had made a mistake, and then he pulled the extra chair out with one hand. "Of course," he said. She sat down. Outside, the rain came harder. Neither of them knew, yet, what that night would cost them, or what it would give back. His name was Daniel Carter, and he was 38 years old, and he had learned to be invisible. It was not something he had set out to do. In another life, or what felt like another life, people had sought him out constantly. Journalists, investors, associates with business cards, acquaintances who materialized at events with warm handshakes and warmer agendas. He had learned, in those years, to read people quickly and to trust slowly. He had learned, in later years, that the second skill was the more important one. Now he sat in a cafe on Clement Street with a cup of drip coffee that had gone slightly cold and a browser tab open to a diagnostic report that was not, technically, urgent. He had been staring at it for 20 minutes without reading a word. His daughter had a school performance tomorrow. She had made him promise 3 times that morning to leave the laptop at home. He had said yes each time, honestly intending to keep the promise. And here he was. He closed the browser tab. He opened a new one. He stared at the blinking cursor. The cafe was the kind of place that had been on this block for 30 years and intended to be there for 30 more. Mismatched chairs. A handwritten menu on a chalkboard. A jar of sugar packets that someone had refilled so many times the jar itself was cloudy. Daniel liked it because no one looked at him here. He was just a man with a cold coffee and an old computer, which was, more or less, exactly what he wanted to be. He noticed the young woman the moment she walked in. She was in her mid-20s, and she was soaked. Her dark hair was flattened against her forehead, and she carried herself with the careful composure of someone who was very close to falling apart, and had decided, as a matter of policy, not to. She went to 3 tables before she came to his. He watched, without appearing to watch, as each rejection landed on her the apologetic shrug, the averted eyes, the woman who put her coat on the empty chair without looking up. When the young woman appeared at his table, he had already moved his bag from the seat across from him. "Excuse me, can I sit with you?" Her voice had the particular quality of someone who has been forcing steadiness into it all day and is nearly out of the effort required to do so. "Of course," he said. She sat with her bag in her lap, both hands wrapped around it. She did not put it down for a long time. "Thank you," she said. "I know I'm sorry. I won't bother you." "You're not bothering me," Daniel said. He turned his laptop screen slightly away, a small gesture toward privacy hers, not his, and went back to the page he had been pretending to read. Outside, the rain found a new register, heavier now, drumming against the awning in waves. The cafe windows fogged at the edges. Someone near the counter laughed at something, and the sound felt far away. The young woman ordered a chamomile tea she probably could not afford and held the cup in both hands when it arrived, and the color came back slowly into her face. Daniel watched none of this and noticed all of it. He had been coming to this cafe for 2 years, long enough to know the particular way the light changed in the afternoon when the fog came in from the bay, how it turned the whole room amber and made even the mismatched chairs look as though they had been arranged by someone who knew what they were doing. Long enough to know that the woman who worked Tuesdays and Thursdays always played jazz at a volume low enough to be felt rather than heard, long enough to have established, without ever declaring it, that the corner table was his. He had not been looking for company. He had not been looking for anything in particular tonight, which was, he had come to understand, the condition that made you most available to the unexpected. The young woman wrapped both hands around her tea and looked out at the rain, and something in her posture, the slight curve of her shoulders, the way she had arranged herself to take up as little space as possible, reminded him of a phrase he had read somewhere years ago, in a book he could no longer name. Something about the weight that invisible people carry, the assumption that no one will notice. He noticed. He did not say anything about it. He turned back to his screen and let the silence between them be what it was, not uncomfortable, not demanding, just the shared quiet of two people in the same room, while rain fell outside and the rest of the city made its noise beyond the glass. Her name was Emily Marsh, and she offered it the way people offer a hand in the dark, carefully, not entirely sure what they will find. Daniel gave her his in return. Just Daniel, no last name. She did not ask. For a while they were simply two people sharing a table and the ambient noise of a warm room while the rain tried to get in through the glass. Emily drank her tea. Daniel looked at his screen. It should have been an arrangement of mutual silence, and in a way it was, but it was the kind of silence that has weight to it, that presses against you until one of you says something. It was Emily who spoke first, and she apologized again as she did, which was a habit Daniel recognized in people who had recently been made to feel that they took up too much space. "I'm sorry, I'm not usually. I've had kind of a day." "Don't apologize," he said. She looked at him as though this were an unusual thing to say. He asked her if she wanted anything to eat, and she said no in the way that means yes if someone asks again. And he asked again, and she said yes, quietly, and he went to the counter and came back with a plate of toast and a small pot of jam that the cafe kept for the regulars, which he happened to be without having ever called himself one. She ate with the careful gratitude of someone who had not eaten since morning. She told him about her week in pieces, the way you do when you have been holding something in all day and a stranger's uncritical attention loosens it. She had worked in design at a small agency. The agency had lost its two biggest clients in the same month. There had been layoffs, and she had been among them. This was 3 weeks ago. She had been interviewing. Nothing had come through yet. She was behind on her rent. She had been with a man for 2 years who had, when things got difficult, demonstrated that the difficulty was a problem she should manage without him. Daniel listened in the way that skilled listeners do, without filling silences, without offering solutions she had not asked for, without the reflexive, "you'll be fine," that people deploy when they are uncomfortable with the weight of someone else's trouble. He said, "That's a lot to carry." She looked at him again with that same slight surprise. "Yeah," she said, "it is." Later she would think about that particular exchange, its brevity, the way it had made her feel neither pitied nor managed. She would think about it the way you turn a coin over, looking for what makes it different from other coins. What she noticed, sitting across from him that first night, he was very still. Not the stillness of inattention, but the opposite, the stillness of someone who had learned to be very present without making a display of it. He had a quality she could not name yet. Something settled about him, like a house that has been standing long enough to stop worrying about the weather. His phone buzzed once. He glanced at it, and for just a moment his expression changed something quick and complicated, and then he set the phone face down and returned his attention to her. "Sorry," he said. "Important?" He thought about it. Not more important than this. She did not know what to make of that. What she knew was this. In 40 minutes of conversation, he had not once checked his phone again after setting it face down. He had not glanced at the door. He had not done the thing that people do in conversations when they are present in body but absent in attention, that slight shift of the eyes that tells you they are composing their next sentence while you are still finishing yours. He was simply here, entirely, as though nothing in the room was more interesting than her, which was, in her recent experience, a rarer quality in a person than it should have been. She found herself talking more than she had intended. Not about the practical things those she had already covered, but about smaller ones. The apartment she had lost, and the window in it that faced east and caught the morning sun in October, in a way that had made her genuinely happy every single day for 2 years. The design work she had been most proud of. A project for a small natural history museum. Illustrations for a migration guide. Work she had done carefully and well, and that had made her feel like herself. The feeling, these last 3 weeks, of not knowing which version of herself she was supposed to be now that the scaffolding had come down. Daniel listened to all of it. When she finished, he did not immediately respond, which she would have found uncomfortable with most people, but found, with him, oddly sustaining, as though her words needed a moment to settle before he disturbed them. Then he said, "The museum guide. What did the birds look like?" She stared at him. "Out of everything I just said. The other things I understood," he said. "The birds I want to picture." She described them, and as she talked she could feel something in her chest loosen. The particular constriction that had been there for 3 weeks, the one she had stopped noticing because she had gotten used to carrying it, releasing slightly in the warm air of a cafe on a rainy Thursday night. She noticed the laptop screen when he turned it slightly, not completely away, and the wallpaper caught the overhead light. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. Dark hair pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, which suggested the pigtails had been done by someone who loved her very much and had not had much practice. She was mid-laugh in the photo, her eyes squinted shut with it, and the background was a field with the gold-brown grass of early October. "She's beautiful," Emily said. Not fishing, just the honest response to an honest image. Daniel looked at the screen. His face did something quiet. "Her name's Lily. How old?" 7. "She'll correct you if you say almost 7 or nearly 8. She's 7. There's a difference, apparently." Emily almost smiled. "She sounds exact. She is. Gets it from her mother." The sentence ended there. Emily heard the tense and did not press it. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, without being asked, "She died 4 years ago. Lily was 3. "I'm sorry," Emily said. "Thank you," he said, in a way that meant he had heard those words many times and still received them, each time, as what they were intended to be. He told Emily a little about Lily, about the pigtails, and the insistence on exactness, and the collection of small, smooth stones that lived in a jar on her windowsill, organized by color in a system only Lily fully understood. He told her that Lily had a performance at school tomorrow and had extracted 3 separate promises from him about the laptop. "And here you are," Emily said. "And here I am," he agreed. He did freelance work, he said. Technical consulting. Some systems work. Remote contracts. Nothing that needed an office. It kept irregular hours, but it kept them fed, and it let him be home when Lily needed him to be home, which was the more important variable in the equation. Emily looked at him, the worn jacket, the old laptop, the drip coffee, and believed him completely. There was nothing in his manner or his surroundings that suggested otherwise. What she felt, listening to him, was something she had not expected to feel that evening. Steadied, as though the weight of her own week had not changed but had been redistributed slightly, made more bearable by the proximity of someone who had carried heavier things and was still here. "You must be a really strong father," she said. He looked at her for a moment, and then he looked down at his coffee, and he picked it up even though it was cold. "I'm just the only one she's got," he said. Emily understood, quietly, that the small correction at the end of the sentence cost him something. She looked at the photo again, Lily mid-laugh, the field behind her, the gold-brown grass that was the color of this specific season. She thought about what it meant to take a photo like that. To be the person standing there with the camera while the child ran and the light was right, and the ordinary world was briefly, completely beautiful. To have that be the image you returned to, at the end of every day, on a laptop in a cafe on Clement Street. She understood something about him then that she could not have articulated clearly, but felt with precision. He had built his life around a single, non-negotiable truth. And everything else, the car, the laptop, the worn jacket, the cold coffee, was the deliberate subtraction of everything that was not that truth. She thought, I have never met anyone like this before. She also thought, I have been talking to a stranger for an hour, and it feels like something else entirely. Outside, the rain fell without apology on the empty patio chairs and the folded umbrellas, and the pavement that reflected the cafe lights back as long, distorted columns of gold. Inside, the room was warm. The jazz, or something like jazz, low and unhurried, moved through the background of everything. The rain did not let up. It had been a drizzle when Emily walked in, and it became, over the course of the next hour, a genuine autumn rain, the kind that settles in for the night with the confidence of a thing that has nowhere else to be. The awning outside began to sag at one corner with the weight of pooled water. A couple who had been sitting on the patio gave up and moved inside, and the cafe became warmer and closer. Emily's phone sat on the table between them, and when the message came through, she felt it before she read it, the way the body sometimes knows bad news before the mind has processed the words. She read it. She read it again. Her landlord. The full text was longer than it needed to be, in the way of messages from people who want to avoid feeling unkind but have decided to be unkind anyway. The substance of it was simple. She had until Sunday. It was Thursday night. She set the phone down face up on the table, and she looked at it, and she did not cry, which cost her something. Daniel had not read the message. He had looked away when her phone lit up, but he read her face, which told him most of what he needed to know. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. She was still doing the arithmetic of her options, and the arithmetic kept coming out the same way. "I'll figure something out," she said, which meant no. Daniel was quiet. He turned his cup in his hands once. He was thinking about something. She could see it. The particular quality of his stillness when he was working through a problem, and she had the sudden awareness that she did not want him to offer her money, that if he did, she would not know how to hold it. He did not offer her money. He said, "There's a guest room in my house. It's just a room, separate entrance, nothing complicated. Lily would probably appreciate having someone else around in the morning. She always makes too much breakfast." Emily looked at him. "You don't know me," she said. "You've known me for 45 minutes. "I know enough," he said. Then, after a pause, "And you know enough about me to decide if this is a terrible idea." She thought about this. She thought about the message on her phone. She thought about the 3 friends she had not called yet, because she was not ready to explain everything again. The explanation that started somewhere around the layoff and ended here, in a cafe on Clement Street with rain on the windows. She thought about his face when he said her name was Lily. "Okay," she said. He nodded, as though she had confirmed something he had already, quietly, decided to accept. His car was parked around the corner, and it was the same vintage as the laptop, not neglected. Exactly, but not recent. He held the umbrella over her side and got himself wet doing it, which she noticed and which he did not appear to notice. She had assumed, without quite forming the assumption, that they were going somewhere close, that the house would be on a narrow street in the Richmond, modest and tidy, the kind of house a man on a freelancer's income keeps as well as he can. They drove for 12 minutes. The neighborhood changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but incrementally. The way a sentence changes its meaning as you add words to it. The streets widened. The gardens became longer. The houses, the ones visible behind hedges and iron gates and mature trees, had the particular confidence of structures that had been built for permanence and had achieved it. Daniel turned the car through a gate that opened as they approached, a detail so understated that Emily almost missed it, and pulled up in front of a house that she needed a moment to understand. It was not a mansion. It was not ostentatious, but it was large. set back behind old oaks, with warm light in the windows and a wraparound porch, and the comfortable authority of a house that has been loved by the right people for a long time. The garden was carefully kept, but not formal. There were 2 bicycles leaning against the side of the porch, and a pair of small rubber boots by the door, and a chalk drawing on the front path that the rain had mostly blurred. Emily sat in the passenger seat for a moment without getting out. "Daniel," she said, "it's dry inside," he said, and got out of the car. She followed. Before they reached the door, it opened. A small figure in striped pajamas appeared in the doorway, 7 years old, pigtails gone sideways, holding a stuffed rabbit that had seen considerably better days. "Daddy." Daniel crouched down and she went into his arms without a word, the way children do when they are past the age of dramatic reunion but have not yet learned to pretend they do not need it. He held her for a moment with his eyes closed. Then Lily looked up and saw Emily. She considered Emily with the direct, unembarrassed assessment of a 7-year-old who has not yet been taught to look away. "You're wet," Lily said. "A bit," Emily agreed. "We have towels," Lily said, with the gravity of someone delivering important logistical information. Then she turned and went back inside, clearly expecting them to follow. Emily looked at Daniel. He shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. "She's very practical." Emily followed the child inside, and the door closed behind them, and the rain kept falling on a house that was warm and lit and large enough that Emily could not, standing in the entryway, see all of it at once. She stood there for a moment while Lily disappeared down the hallway in search of the promised towels, and she looked at the entryway, the coats on the hooks, a small pair of rain boots beside a larger pair, a drawing taped to the wall at child height, executed in crayon with great seriousness, depicting what appeared to be either a horse or a very optimistic dog. The house smelled of dinner and wood smoke and something faintly floral she couldn't identify, and it was the smell more than anything else that undid her slightly, because it was the smell of a place that was genuinely, continuously lived in, where meals had been cooked and a child had been put to bed, and someone had built a fire against the autumn cold, and all of it had happened without an audience, without performance, just the ordinary accumulation of a life being lived with care. She had grown up in a house that smelled like this. She had forgotten, until this moment, that such houses existed. Daniel came in behind her and hung his jacket on the hook beside hers and said nothing about the house and nothing about her standing there looking at it, which was the correct response and which told her, more than anything else had, that he understood what it meant to let someone into a space and then leave them alone with their first impression of it. She stayed 3 days. That was what she told herself at the outset, 3 days. To sort out the apartment situation, to make calls, to get her bearings. 3 days had the quality of a sensible plan. The guest room was at the back of the house, past the kitchen, with a window that looked onto the garden. It had its own small bathroom and a key that Daniel left on the dresser the first morning without comment. The room was simply furnished a bed, a reading chair, a lamp, but the small details of it were not cheap. Emily noticed this the way you notice the quality of a fabric by handling it. The weight of the curtains, the feel of the towels, the way the door closed with a solid, precise click. She noticed other things. The room Daniel used as a study, she glimpsed it once through a half-open door, had 4 large monitors arranged in a workstation configuration she recognized from technology companies she had designed materials for. The kind of setup that cost more than her last 3 months' rent. There were phone calls. He took them in the study with the door closed, and she could not hear the substance of them, but she caught fragments, words like quarterly and due diligence, and the phrase, "we can't move the timeline," said with the flat authority of someone who was not asking. There was a letter, left on the kitchen counter one morning, from a private bank she recognized. Not the kind of bank that has branches with ATM lobbies, the kind that has a managing director and an appointment system. But he drove the same car. He wore the same kind of clothes, good quality, she was beginning to notice, but deliberately understated. He cooked dinner in the kitchen with Lily narrating the proceedings. and he walked her to school each morning, and he was home when she finished, and none of these things changed regardless of what the monitors said or who called on the phone with their timelines. On the second evening, while Lily was in bed, Emily was in the kitchen and found herself with her phone in her hand and a search term in the bar before she had consciously decided to look. Daniel Carter, San Francisco, technology. The results came back. She sat with the phone and read. Not quickly, slowly, the way you read something that is rearranging what you thought you knew. A piece from 5 years ago in a technology publication. A clean exit from a cloud infrastructure company he had co-founded. Acquired for a number that made Emily set the phone down and pick it up again. A brief profile from 3 years ago, after which the coverage dropped off almost entirely. No panels, no public appearances, no announcements. A small item, 18 months old, noted that Daniel Carter had made a quiet investment in 3 early-stage companies. She looked at the name for a long time. She thought about the cafe and the corner table and the way he had pulled the chair out before she even finished asking. She thought about the toast he had ordered without making it into a gesture, without attaching anything to it, no expectation, no performance of generosity, just a plate of food because she was hungry and he had noticed. She thought about the umbrella on the walk to his car, the way he had held it over her side. None of these things changed. That was what she kept returning to. The knowledge. In the background of everything she had seen in the last 2 days, the monitors, the phone calls, the letter from the bank, was that none of it had changed the texture of a single hour in this house. He cooked dinner the same way. He helped Lily with her math homework the same way, which was to say patiently and with the willingness to be wrong. To demonstrate that wrong answers were part of the process rather than evidence of failure. He made coffee in the morning and left a cup on the counter for Emily without announcing it, in the specific, unremarkable way of someone who has decided, without drama, that you are part of the household now. The money was real. The man was also real. She was trying to understand how both of those things were true at the same time. She set her phone face down on the counter and went to bed. She asked him the next morning. Lily was at school. The kitchen was in that particular quiet it had after she left dishes in the rack. The coffee still warm. The slight readjustment that a space makes when a 7-year-old has just vacated it. Emily set her phone on the table with the screen up. He looked at it. He looked at her. "When were you going to tell me?" she said. He picked up his coffee. He took a slow drink. He set it down again. "I don't usually tell people," he said. "I'm not usually people." He considered this for a moment. Then he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He had built the company over 6 years, he said. Boring years. In many ways, server architecture, infrastructure problems, the unglamorous plumbing of the internet. He had co-founded it with 2 people he trusted, and they had built something useful. And then a larger company had decided it wanted that useful thing and had been prepared to pay significantly for it. The sale had taken 9 months of negotiation. By the end of it, he was 32 and had more money than he had ever seriously imagined having. His wife had been sick for 18 months by then. She died 8 months after the sale. He said this without particular inflection, which was not the absence of feeling but something harder, the compression of feeling into a form that could be carried without showing. "After that, I just stopped," he said. "Stopped appearing at things. Stopped taking meetings. I had Lily. That was the job. The consulting work," Emily said. "Real," he said. "I do it because I like the problems, not because I need to." She looked at him, the worn jacket hanging on the back of his chair, the old coffee cup, the complete lack of performance in anything about the way he inhabited this kitchen. "You could live anywhere," she said. "I live here," he said. "Lily likes her school. She likes the garden. She likes the man who runs the bookshop on 6th. Moving would be about me, not her." Emily was quiet for a moment. "Why the old car?" she asked. "The old laptop. Thanks for watching." MC the times he tonighted, too. He seemed to think about how to say it. Because the day I sold the company was not the best day of my life, he said. And I didn't want to build a life around reminding myself of it. She understood that. She understood it in the specific way you understand something that is slightly larger than anything you've understood before, with a feeling of reaching. That night at the cafe, she said, I sat with you because you looked kind. He held her gaze. Something in his expression shifted slightly, careful and controlled. Good, he said. That means I did something right. They sat with that for a while. The kitchen had its morning sounds around them. The refrigerator, a bird outside, the distant passage of a car on the wet street. Emily said, Does Lily know? She knows we have enough, Daniel said. She knows her mother left her a college fund. She doesn't need to know numbers. Numbers don't mean anything to a 7-year-old. And I'd rather she grow up understanding what things cost in terms of effort and care before she learns what they cost in terms of money. That's a particular kind of parenting philosophy, Emily said. It's the only one I could figure out, he said. He turned his cup once. My wife would have had it more worked out. She was better at the long view. He said it without self-pity, which was somehow harder to receive than self-pity would have been. Self-pity has edges you can push against. This was just a fact. She would have been better at the long view. He had found his way to a version of the long view on his own, but he had not pretended, even to himself, that it was the same. Emily looked at her hands on the table. I'm glad you were at that cafe, she said. It was not quite what she meant, but it was the part of what she meant that she was ready to say. He looked at her for a long moment. So am I, he said. Marcus showed up on the Saturday. She saw him from the upstairs window before he rang the bell, his car at the curb. The way he sat with his hands on the wheel for a moment before getting out, which was a habit she recognized from a time she had spent too much time reading his habits. He had a manner of entering spaces as though he were doing them a favor, and he wore it now, coming up the front path, hands in his jacket pockets, head slightly inclined. She knew, with the specific and unpleasant precision of someone who has been in that relationship, exactly why he was here. Daniel was in the kitchen with Lily, who was constructing an argument for pancakes with the systematic thoroughness of someone who had prepared her case in advance. Emily heard the bell and went downstairs herself. She opened the door. Marcus looked past her, at the house, with an expression he did not try to conceal. Nice place, he said. You've landed softly. What do you want, Marcus? He looked at her then. He had the facility of certain people with a particular kind of smile, the kind that suggested an understanding between the two of you that was slightly to his advantage. I wanted to see how you were doing, see if maybe we were being hasty. We weren't, Emily said. Behind her, she heard footsteps, measured ones. Daniel appeared in the hallway. He did not come to the door. He stood several feet back with his hands easy at his sides. Which was, she would think later, a very particular form of restraint, the stillness of someone who has learned the difference between intervening and being present. Marcus looked at him. Marcus recalibrated. This your situation? Marcus asked her, with a gesture that managed to encompass Daniel in the house, and a set of implications he did not bother to conceal. My situation, Emily said evenly, is none of your business. Daniel said nothing. He stayed where he was, and his expression was the same as it had been in the cafe on Thursday, patient, attentive, entirely without agitation. It was this, more than anything else, that unmanned Marcus. There was nothing to push against. No heat to meet with heat, just a man standing calmly in a hallway looking at him, and the house around them, and the smell of pancakes from the kitchen where a 7-year-old was prosecuting her case about butter. Marcus said something she did not quite catch, something meant to sound lighter than it felt, and he went back to his car. Emily closed the door. She stood for a moment with her hand on the latch. Daniel said, Lily is going to want you to weigh in on the butter question. Just so you're prepared. Emily turned around. She was not entirely sure what she felt, something with relief in it, and anger at the residue Marcus left even in leaving, and something else, something she was not ready to name yet. "I'm pro-Butter," she said. "She'll like you," Daniel said. He turned back toward the kitchen, and she followed. October sharpened over the next 3 weeks. Emily found a temporary position, a 3-month design contract for a small publishing house that had been recommended by someone she'd worked with before. The money was not abundant, but it was real, and it let her start looking at apartments with the calm attention of someone who has options, rather than the anxious attention of someone who does not. She did not move out immediately. There was no particular reason to rush, and Daniel did not create one. The arrangement had settled into something that was not quite routine, but had the texture of one coffee in the morning. Lily's logistics. The evenings, when Daniel worked late in the study and Emily sat in the kitchen with her laptop and her design files and the house's specific quiet. She went to Lily's soccer practice on a Wednesday because Daniel had a call that ran long. She stood at the sideline with the other parents and watched Lily pursue the ball with great conviction and inconsistent technique, and she felt, standing there in the October cold, an uncomplicated gladness that surprised her. Lily told her about the stones on the windowsill. Each one had been found somewhere specific: the beach at Half Moon Bay, the park where her mother used to take her, the garden after the first hard rain last November. She explained the color system in careful detail. Emily listened with the same quality of attention she had watched Daniel give her that first night in the cafe, and thought, this is a thing he has taught her, to be heard. On a Thursday evening in mid-October, they were sitting on the porch, the three of them, Lily in her coat with the rabbit in her lap, Daniel with coffee, Emily with tea, watching the last light go out of the garden. Lily had been told twice that it was bedtime, and had found twice that the information failed to compel her. She climbed off her chair and into Emily's lap without asking, which was Lily's method of asking, and settled there with the rabbit between them. "Daddy," Lily said. Can Emily stay?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. He looked at Emily, and Emily looked at him over Lily's head, and the light in the garden was almost gone, and the air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves. "That's Emily's question," Daniel said. Lily swiveled to look at Emily directly. Emily looked at this child in her lap, the uneven pigtails, the serious eyes, the rabbit, the stones on the windowsill, all of it, and felt something settle in her, deep and slow, like sediment that has been suspended in water finally finding the floor. "I'm not going anywhere just yet," Emily said. Lily accepted this with the equanimity of someone who has done their negotiating and achieved a workable outcome. She turned back to the garden. Daniel did not say anything. But when Emily looked at him, his gaze was still on the middle distance, and the corner of his mouth had a quality to it that she was beginning to learn to read. Later, when Lily was asleep, they sat on the porch without her, in the specific quiet that children leave behind them when they go to bed. The neighborhood was settled. A car went past. Somewhere a dog commented on something. "I didn't expect this," Emily said. She meant the house and the porch, and the child asleep upstairs, and also something larger than all of those things. "Neither did I," Daniel said. She turned her cup in her hands, the way she had watched him turn his, that first night in the cafe. "That night," she said, "I just needed a chair." Daniel looked at her. "And somehow," he said. Neither of them moved for a while. The dark had come fully now, and the garden was only shapes, and the porch light threw a warm circle that included them both. She thought about what it meant to stay somewhere. Not in the logistical sense, the practicalities of that were still unresolved, still being arranged in the background, but in the other sense. The staying that is a decision about who you are willing to be in proximity to, and for how long, and what you are willing to let matter. She had spent the better part of 2 years with Marcus, and had never once sat on a porch in the dark feeling this particular quality of ease. The ease that is not the absence of complexity, but the presence of someone you trust with the complexity. These were different things. She was learning. Daniel said, "I should warn you. She's going to ask about this again tomorrow. The staying question? She has a very low tolerance for unresolved matters. She gets it from her father." He looked at her sideways, and she looked back, and neither of them said anything else for a while, which was fine. The porch held them both, and the garden was quiet. And somewhere on the street, below a neighbor's cat, was conducting a one-sided argument with the darkness. A year later. October, again. The same cafe on Clement Street. The same corner table. Outside, a fine rain on the pavement, the streetlights making halos in the wet dark. Different, though. The table had 4 chairs now, 2 of which were occupied by people who had aged in the way a year ages you, when the year has been good, a little softer, a little more settled, with fewer edges they felt the need to defend. Lily sat between them, or rather, occupied the space between them in the lateral, sprawling way of a child who has been told to sit properly and has made a strategic compromise with the instruction. She was halfway through a hot chocolate and a picture she was drawing on a paper placemat. She had insisted on coming. She always insisted. Emily had her own mug now. The cafe staff had started recognizing her, which was the kind of thing that happened when you came somewhere regularly with the same man and the same child and always ordered the same tea. The barista had greeted her by name when they walked in, and Lily had looked up with satisfaction, as though this were the result of a plan she had been executing. Daniel's laptop was not with him. Emily had noticed this with the specific pleasure of someone who knows the significance of an absence. He had left it at home. He had not mentioned it. It was simply not here. She had found a job she liked, a mid-sized design studio with good people and interesting problems, and a principal partner who ran the place with the kind of direct, uncomplicated professionalism that Emily had not known to look for until she had been in its absence. She had rented an apartment in the spring, a studio in Noe Valley, close enough to walk to Daniel's on the evenings she did not stay. The apartment was hers, entirely, and she had furnished it slowly and on her own terms, and it was the first place she had lived that felt like a decision she had made rather than a circumstance she had arrived in. Lily had opinions about the apartment. She had expressed them. Emily had adopted 2 of them. It was not a neat arrangement in the way of certain stories. No grand declaration had been made, no single moment when everything settled into a new shape. It had happened the way the year had happened, incrementally in the space between ordinary things, as trust does when neither person is demanding it arrive faster than it wants to. There had been hard conversations about what he wanted and what she needed, and what Lily could hold and what Lily could not, about the money, its presence, its implications, the way it had the capacity to warp things if they let it. Daniel had said, "I don't want it to be why." She had understood him. She had told him it wasn't. She had meant it. There had been evenings when the distance between them felt large and neither of them closed it, and mornings when the distance was simply gone. These things did not resolve into a simple story. They were the texture of it. Now Lily put her crayon down and looked up. "This is where you met," she said. It was not quite a question. She had heard the story before, but she said it with the particular quality of a child who wants to hear it again. "This is where we met," Emily confirmed. "You asked him if you could sit down." "I did." Lily looked at her father. "Daddy said yes." "Daddy said, of course." Lily considered this distinction seriously. "That's better than yes," she decided. Daniel picked up his coffee. He looked at Emily over the rim of it with an expression she knew completely by now, the particular quality of his attention when he was not performing it, when it was just there, directed at her, steady and without agenda. "Remember what you told me," Emily said. "When I said I sat with you because you looked kind. I told you it meant I did something right. It was the best decision I ever made," she said. Sitting down. He set his coffee down. "Mine too," he said. Lily had gone back to her drawing. She was adding details to something. Emily leaned slightly and saw it was the 3 of them. stick figures in some configuration, in a house with a peaked roof and large windows and 2 oak trees on either side. The crayon version of the house looked exactly right. Outside, the rain found the same rhythm it always found in October, steady and patient, neither insistent nor retreating. The cafe windows gathered fog at the edges. Someone near the counter laughed at something, and the sound was close and warm. Lily drew a sun above the house. It was raining outside, but she drew it there anyway, in the upper left corner of the placemat, with 12 careful yellow lines radiating out. Neither of the adults said anything about this. They understood. There is a particular quality to the moment when a child draws a sun in the wrong weather. It is not innocence, exactly, and it is not obliviousness. It is something more deliberate than both a statement of intent, or a preference, or the particular power that 7-year-olds have to insist on their version of how things ought to be, and then simply draw it into existence with 12 careful yellow lines. Emily kept the placemat. She folded it carefully when they stood to leave, and put it in the inside pocket of her jacket without saying anything about it. And Daniel saw her do it and said nothing either, and Lily was already at the door, pulling on her coat. They walked out into the rain together. The 3 of them, under the same umbrella, which was not large enough for 3 people. Daniel held it and got wet on his side, and Lily complained that the rain was getting on her shoe, and Emily held Lily's hand so she wouldn't have to manage her coat zipper in the wind. It was a small logistical arrangement. It was also everything. Sometimes you walk into a room looking for a chair and find the rest of your life. Not because the universe arranged it, but because you were tired enough to stop pretending you didn't need somewhere to sit. The rain doesn't